Hello everybody, welcome back to the video. Today we're reacting to 1946, the greatest depression in US history prior to 2020. So in the last video I mentioned about the Great Depression, and this person by the name of TIK-HISTOry. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that name wrong, but hey, he told me to react to this video to help me learn more about the Great Depression. So I wrote notes, just a paragraph, but hey, says here, the Great Depression, worldwide economic downturn that began in 1929 and lasted until about 1939. I don't know why it started in 1929, because it started in 1946, but I don't know. Maybe my article was wrong, or it's just a different one. The Great Depression caused drastic declines in output, severe unemployment, and acute deflation in almost every country of the world. So it's a economic downturn. I don't know much about economy, so yeah. So here we're reacting to TIK-HISTOry, and yes, like and subscribe. Let's get right to the video. This reaction might actually be a two-part reaction series, because this video is 30 minutes and 25 seconds, so I might make just two parts, so just wait for part 2. But the next video is going to be the Pacific War episode 0.5, because I just wanted to finish the prelude and come back to episode 3. So here we go. I'm gonna press the record button, and here we go. It's starting. This is my first time learning about the Great Depression. I don't know much about it, so I might not pause that much. So yeah, I'm sorry for not pausing that much, because I don't know so much about the Great Depression. I just know some in like the wars, and yeah, let's just hold on. Okay.
In 1945, as the Second World War ended, the economy of the United States entered the worst economic depression in its history, although 2020 may surpass it. In the first year of this depression, real gross domestic product shrank by 4%, and in 1946, real GDP dropped by 20.6%. Not only was this way worse than the year 1932, the peak of the Great Depression that started with the Wall Street crash, but per capita output did not regain its 1944 level until 1964. You can see this on charts like this one from the Institute for Economics and Peace. The blue line shows that there was a major reduction in real GDP at the end of the Second World War, and confirms that it didn't really surpass this until the 1960s. You can find similar looking charts all over the internet or in the books. Here's another from Wikipedia, this time showing that the real GDP numbers recovered by about 1950. No matter where you pull the numbers from, they show a huge decrease in real GDP in this period, anywhere from 11.6% to 20.6%.
Hold on. I don't know why it decreased to 360p. What? The 720p. Come on. Okay.
And loads in between. Again, Wikipedia lists a 12.7% decrease on its list of recessions in the United States page, stating the decline in government spending at the end of World War II led to an enormous drop in gross domestic product, making this technically a recession. Technically a recession? Technically? This was the worst recession in US history, at least prior to 2020, so of course it's a recession. And according to the real per capita gross national product data, it only took 12 years to recover from the 1929 crash, whereas it took 20 years to recover from the 1946.
Oh, so the 1929 9 is the Wall Street crash? Oh, because he said a crash, so that means the Wall Street crash. So 12 years to recover from the Great Depression of 1929 and 20 years to recover from 1946. I'm sorry, my dogs are barking. I don't know why, but coming back, I didn't know that. Wow, there were 2 Great Depressions. Number 1 is the Great Depression of 1929, the 20 years to recover from 1946 depression. This might actually be the 1946 depression. So yeah, I didn't know that. Wow, okay.
Depression. And this was exactly what the mainstream economists had predicted at the time. They claimed during the war that there would be a massive recession at the end of the war. Their predictions showed that unemployment would be massive because of the huge number of military men coming back from the war and the closure of the munitions factories. All these men would just be dumped into the civilian economy, which wouldn't be able to cope. Millions would be lying in the gutters and everything would be bad.
Yeah, that makes sense because they enlist themselves to the army to fight in a huge war. But what if the war ended? What are they gonna do? Nothing. Because there's gonna be a lot of unemployment, and yeah, there's gonna be a lot because in World War II, there's like how many people? Like if knowing that 80 million people died in World War II. I'm going to look up that how many people enlist in the US Army, but hey, I'm gonna look that up and I might try to make a video about that. So yeah.
And indeed, the official unemployment rate during the greatest recession in US history, 1946, was somewhere around the massive 2.6%, although Wikipedia puts it as high as 5.2%, which is still the lowest unemployment rate in any recession in the 20th century by its own estimations. From all this, the student of economic history will no doubt conclude that the heretofore neglected Great Depression of 1946 was the worst cyclical downturn in modern American economic history, and that by some measures it had a greater disruptive impact on the American economy than the earlier, more celebrated Great Depression of 1929 to 41. And yet, historians have completely ignored this recession. You won't find a single history book which talks about the millions of unemployed, the massive 2, 3 to 5% unemployment rate, or the contraction of the economy. In fact, you'll hear quite a bit about a supposed post-war boom in the United States economy. The decade following World War II is fondly remembered as a period of economic growth and cultural stability. America had won the war and defeated the forces of evil in the world. The hardships of the previous 15 years of war and depression were replaced by rising living standards, increased opportunities, and a newly emerging American culture confident of its future and place in the world.
And that's wrong, because the post-world America was dealing with the Great Depression. Okay. That's the first time I learned about that.
Obviously, human memory must be wrong, because the statistics clearly show that there was an economic downturn of truly epic proportions in 1946. The economy seemingly did plunge into depression in 1946. At least, that is the conclusion one must reach if one takes seriously the official gross domestic product (GDP) data on which economists and historians normally base their accounts of macroeconomic fluctuations. And the Great Depression of 1946 has been worsening every decade. In 1960, when Historical Statistics of the United States Colonial Times to 1957 was published, the reported decline in real GNP in 1946 was but 7.8%, and for the 3 years 1944 to 47, just 9.8%, hardly a Great Depression. When the next edition of Historical Statistics was published in 1975, however, the 1946 decline was a more robust 12%, and the total business cycle downturn 1944-47 saw a drop in real output of 14.2%. By 1981, when the Department of Commerce reported revised national income data, the 1946 drop had reached a truly depressing 14.7%, with the episodic decline reaching 17.4%. 5 years later, in 1986, the 1946 depression truly earned the label of great when the latest revisions in statistics revealed the 19% drop discussed above. The Great Depression of 1946 seems to be getting constantly worse, and if current trends continue, should soon pass the 1929 depression in magnitude by any criteria. And indeed, it has passed it. We are at a 20.6% drop at the moment, although it looks like it'll soon be worse than that. So, what's going on here? No one remembers or writes about the Great Depression of 1946. In fact, median family income at the time grew slightly, from $2,410 in 1944 to $2,595 in 1945, and then went up to $2,659 in 1946. And it was during this period that you have the baby boom generation, referring to the people born between 1946 and 1964, the exact years it took to get out of the supposed Great Depression of 1946. People thought, we're in a miserable recession, so better have lots of kids, because when I'm suffering from severe economic hardship, the only thing I can think of is making poverty babies.
I don't know why. Like, that makes your situation worse, having a lot of babies in around like the Great Depression. Because why? That's too much responsibility. Knowing that there's this economic downturn, it would make your situation worse. Like, damn.
6.
Wait, so 1946. After 1946, there's this war. What was that? Oh, the Cold War. Huh. I kind of want to learn about the Cold War. I know the greatest depression in US history is, I don't know, knowing that it's 1946 and 1964. There's some parts there that the US is at war with Russia, but not really at war. Not hand-in-hand combat. Like, just a stalemate of a war. Like, you know, a phony war. They were not doing anything. They're just threatening and spying each other. So yeah, Cold War. So yeah.
People thought, we're in a miserable recession, so better have lots of kids, because when I'm suffering from severe economic hardship, the only thing I can think of is making poverty babies. Contemporary Americans experienced 1946 as a gloriously prosperous year that had nothing in common with 1932. So yes, the statistics show a Great Depression in 1946, even though this was a period in US history of unparalleled economic growth, sometimes referred to as an economic miracle. So clearly, these statistics are flawed. But here's the problem. See, the mainstream traditional narrative states that the Wall Street crash of 1929 led to the Great Depression, and despite policies like the New Deal, it was only World War II which got America out of the Depression.
See? Because of World War II got America out of the Depression. So yeah. Because of the openings of more arms industries and people getting enlisted to the army to fight in this huge war. So yeah, World War II got America out of the Great Depression.
1929 led to the Great Depression, and despite policies like the New Deal, it was only World War II which got America out of the Depression. The narrative is that government spending on tanks and bullets during the war led to a production miracle and a great wartime boom, thus proving that the government should spend its way out of recessions. The economic statistics used to show that this is the case are the ones we've just seen, the GDP and GNP numbers, as well as unemployment numbers and so on. If you look at the GDP numbers, it clearly shows an economic boom during World War II, as well as during Roosevelt's New Deal era. Again, proof that World War II got America out of the Depression. But this is where the traditional narrative stops. Their conclusion is, war is good, the end. Except, no it isn't. If you use the very same statistics which prove that World War II got America out of the Depression and continue them into the post-war period, you then get the greatest depression in US history, the 1946 slump. But we know that this slump is fiction. It simply didn't happen. So these statistics are clearly fiction too, which is perhaps why the predictions of the mainstream economists of the time, that there would be high unemployment and so on, were ever so slightly completely incorrect. And the same fictional statistics that prove that the 1946 collapse happened are the exact same fictional statistics that are also used to prove that the wartime boom happened as well. So what does this mean? Well, if we dismiss as spurious the GDP data that indicate a post-war depression, are we warranted in dismissing the GDP data that indicate a wartime boom? Turns out, yes. Yes, we are. These statistics are pretty much the only evidence we have for a wartime boom. In fact, we have a lot of evidence which goes against the idea of a wartime boom. This is why historians have dismissed or ignored the statistics when talking about the immediate post-war period, because the statistics go against the contemporary reports of a booming post-war economy. Official unemployment figures do show a decrease in unemployment during the war years by 7.45 or 4.62 million people depending on the figures used. Unemployment went from 15.7% in 1940 to 1.3% by 1944, then went up slightly to 2.6% in 1946 and 3.8% in 1947. However, there's a problem. If, say, there were millions of lazy unemployed in Britain right now, and I gave them all unemployment benefits, so I paid them money even though they're not working or contributing to society, and then I said, see, I've reduced unemployment because now they're getting paid, you'd say, no, that's not solved the unemployment crisis, you're just paying them for doing nothing. They're not economically productive, so they're still unemployed. Okay, well, similarly, if I paid the unemployed people as before, but I also gave them a rifle and shipped them to France, does that mean they're not unemployed anymore? Well, no, because they're still not economically productive. They're still technically unemployed. They're not contributing to the domestic economy at all. In fact, they're actually a drain on the domestic economy, since the people who are actually working are having to produce goods and services for themselves and the people you've shipped off abroad to die in a foreign country. So while they do have jobs, they technically be classed as unemployed from an economic and logical standpoint. Now, I'm not saying that military people aren't doing something useful. Arguably, they are keeping the country safe. Great. However, you can't turn around and say that they're economically contributing to society, because they're not.
Yeah, they're not. They're just fighting for the country. They're not helping the economy. They're just protecting it. They get the aid from the country. They just protect it. So that means they're still unemployed.
They're draining the resources of society as if they were unemployed.
Yeah.
If 20 people made 20 loaves of bread for themselves, so they consumed 1 loaf of bread each per day, and then we shipped 10 of them abroad, then everybody gets half a loaf of bread each. Living standards would actually go down for the workers who are working. This is what happens when you have unemployed people in the economy or government employees, because either way, these people take from the people who do work and then don't produce anything of economic value in return. If they did produce something of economic value, then we wouldn't have to take from the workers in the first place. Tax would be voluntary. The fact that it isn't is proof that they are not producing anything of economic value to the rest of society. As Rothbard states, any increase of taxes and government spending will discourage saving and investment and stimulate consumption, since government spending is all consumption. Now, when looking at the US economy in World War II, not only have you taken a bunch of unemployed men, handed them a rifle, shipped them to France or Iwo Jima, and then claimed that this has solved the unemployment crisis, but you've also taken some of the employed men from the economy too. 16 million men worked in the armed forces of the United States in World War II. Well, even taking the highest figure, unemployment fell by 7.45 million men. So, you've drafted more people during the war than were unemployed before the war, meaning you've taken some of the experienced workers out of the economy, and you now have a labour shortage. Thus, you saw women, old men, teenagers, basically less skilled or inexperienced workers being employed in the factories in the United States. And the mainstream economists and historians will tell you it was this, the sending away of some of the most experienced workers to die on the shores of foreign lands, and the drafting of less skilled or inexperienced workers, which led to the greatest economic boom the economy of the United States ever had.
Drafting the most experienced people in your economy, and just to die in the battlefield. Okay, and yeah, that does make sense. That does make sense. Whoa. I'm sorry if I'm not really talking that much. I feel what they're feeling right now, because imagine living in America in this time, like a Great Depression and economic downturn. It's pretty bad. I actually saw a video made by Infographic. What is life inside the Great Depression? I want to react to that in a future video.
Really? Does this make any logical sense to anyone? Similarly, producing tanks, bullets, ships and planes does not equal economic growth. If it did, building a fleet of ships, sending them out to the middle of the Atlantic and then sinking them would produce an economic boom. Clearly, that's stupid. Well, so is military production in general. What matters when it comes to economics is that living standards increase as a result of economic activity. We all want to be better off than we were yesterday. Producing warplanes doesn't equal higher living standards. Building Sherman tanks might win the war, but won't put food on your plate, nor a car in your driveway.
Yeah, just military production doesn't help the economy. It's just you're making a machine where you're just gonna send it to a battlefield where that machine can get destroyed or just get stolen. So yeah, it's not gonna help you. It's not gonna make you money. Like, oh, this guy just destroyed a tank, so we're gonna get like money from that. Like, no.
As left-wing economist Seymour Melman pointed out, whatever else you can do with a nuclear-powered submarine that is almost as long as 2 football fields and capable of cruising underwater for weeks at high speeds, you can't wear it, you can't live in it, you can't travel in it, and there's nothing you can produce with it.
Okay, let's stop there. So we're going to stop our reaction there. This is the first part of our reaction to 1946, the greatest depression in US history. It's 15 minutes and 10 seconds, and it's just almost half, so that makes sense. So I learned, okay, so the Wall Street crash happened in 1929, and it says here until 41, so it ended in 1941. But in my research says it it started in 1929 and ended in 1929. I'm so confused, but I'm just going to side with the video that and the Wall Street crash ended in 1941. But here in this 1946, the Great Depression, it says it ended in 1964. So I don't know, but I learned some parts. So yeah, wow, that's economy. But additional, the Cold War is happening in the post World War II era, and I actually saw a channel in YouTube, the Cold War, and I want to react to them. Like, it's very interesting channel. It's about the Cold War, the post World War II America, post World War II Soviet Union, post World War II United Kingdom. So yeah, so thank you for watching, everybody. Like and subscribe. The next video is going to be the Pacific Wars 0.5, and the next video is going to be part 2 of 1946, the greatest depression in US history prior to 2020, and after that is going to be Pacific War episode 0.6, and after that, I don't know, I might actually react to another video that Akivech suggested to me, and it's about the Treaty of Versailles. So yeah, so I want to learn a lot about this. So yeah, thank you for watching, everybody. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.